Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Diego's podcast. This is your favorite audio podcast in the world. So, today we are going to play and live inside a hypothetical world. We're going to travel through a time to talk about, think about, and dissect what it means to be Hispanic, what it means to navigate that identity, that race, and that belonging, these different concepts. And what better place to do it? And what better place to time travel to the 1940s Los Angeles? Now, when you think of 1940s LA, what comes to mind? Probably Hollywood, silver screens, classic movies, and post-war glamour. But beneath the glitz, there was a real racial tension brewing in the streets. A boiling point between Anglo-Americans and Mexican-Americans. And in this world, I am a time traveler, and I ask myself, where would I fit in? I am from LA, born and raised. I am Hispanic. I speak Spanish. I live it. I breathe it. But I'm Hispanic from Spain, from Europe. So technically, on paper, I'm white. However, I would consider myself ethnically ambiguous because of my thick black hair, my darker complexion, and sometimes people have a difficult time with categorizing myself. Usually, sometimes they get it right as, oh, you're Spanish or you're Hispanic. But most of the time, they never always hit it right on. And if they don't know my name, I've gotten all different types of countries and ethnicities, mostly being places like Turkey, Egypt, Italian, Greek. But anyway, the list goes on. Now, no, there's no issue with me being considered white. This is not at all what I'm trying to argue or try to even bring up at all. Nothing. It's just the complexity of how I may seem or may look in terms of my physical appearance. I thought it might be a good idea to kind of play into that and talk about that and see what it would be like for someone like me in similar fashion and similar physical appearance as someone who would be Mexican American at that age of 20 years old, with the thick black hair, the dark eyebrows, the darker skin, and I thought that'd be interesting because that was the case. Those were the kids looked like, specifically the Mexican Americans. But anyway, I'm losing track. In 1940s LA, racism was operating in full force. And I kind of, I wonder, me being a Spanish man, would I be treated like a Spaniard? Or would I be categorized as a Mexican or another Mexican in the eyes of the white Anglo-Americans? If I didn't say anything, if I didn't speak any English, and I just simply was walking down the streets, I think I would be just simply lumped in. Because again, I don't look similar, but I carry some features that would align more with the Mexican audience or Mexican groups of men. But obviously, there's a history of there would probably be a different perception if I had the opportunity to speak to the Anglo-Americans and let them know that I am a Spaniard, because obviously Anglo-American, descendants of the British, descendants of Europe, Spain being in Europe, both being Spain and Britain and both America as well, colonial powers, there seems to be an allyship, and not only to include that, specifically in LA and California as well. Anglo-Americans, when settling into California, adopted this infatuation with a Spanish colonial past. Albeit maybe they don't like the Spanish people themselves, but they truly envision California, when creating California to the place that it is now, to be it should be Spanish. And so I wonder if I would mention, if I were Spanish, would I be treated differently because of that infatuation by many Anglo-Americans? The reason why there are houses all over the place that kind of look Spanish and that have that Spanish colonial style, the reason why there's still missions, the reason why a lot of the streets are named the way they are, is because of that infatuation. And so that also ties into, would I be saved? Would I just be lumped in and treated as horrible as the Mexican Americans? And so that's why it's an interesting thing. And obviously I can't answer. There will never be an answer. I can only just assume, because we obviously can't go back in time. But I find it interesting to think about these things, and I think what would happen is the sailors that did fight and oppress and beat up and fight the Mexican Americans in the suit riots, I think they wouldn't give me the time of day. I think they'd lump me in and beat me and fight me. I also believe that the police officers would also as well. I think maybe if you'd go to a random, person that wasn't necessarily like a bystander, a white Anglo-American bystander, they'd maybe have a different opinion. But again, with the way America and the way people acted back then, I feel like, albeit they had a big infatuation with Spanish past, I feel like people would still find a way to kind of discriminate you or look at you wrong, and for me personally, as a Spanish man, being from Europe, I'm white passing or white, and but I look different, I sound different when I speak my different language, and there are some times now in present day where you get the wrong look, you get that kind of microaggressions by people. So, albeit yes, I'm an ally and definitely of descent of people or a country that was one of the biggest colonial powers in the world. In a country like America, in a state like California, there are still these things that make me feel like some sort of some sort of discrimination, some sort of prejudice, albeit small or slightly microaggressions, because we are Hispanic and we speak the same language, and sometimes we look very similar to each other or have similar qualities in our genetics. People lump us in. I feel like that's a very American thing, especially a very American thing when not American thing, obviously that's not what I'm exactly saying, but what I'm trying to say is that I feel like sometimes Americans can be very ignorant and also very naive and also very just quick to think. And so when they see someone speaking Spanish, a lot of people don't give the 2 cents and just like, oh, Spanish, Hispanic, or Spanish, when that person could be Mexican, but you call them Spanish. Oh, those guys are Spanish. They speak Spanish. Or for my situation, oh, he's Spanish, or he's speaking Spanish. Oh, he could be Colombian, or he can be that and that. I mean, it's also kind of the thing where I never experienced it because obviously I wasn't. Growing up, I experienced it. Obviously, my name is Diego, Spanish name. growing up as a kid, people would always ask me, "Are you Mexican? You're Mexican. Aren't you Mexican? Are you Mexican?" And obviously, no issue being called Mexican, but that's the thing. Or sometimes because of the constant, or because of the huge population of Mexican people here in California, a lot of people make the assumption that if someone looks quote-unquote Mexican or sounds quote-unquote Mexican, therefore by just the sheer fact that there's a huge population of them, that this person could be Mexican. Again, this is why I find it so interesting to feel like, and kind of imagine myself as someone in 1943 Los Angeles. You know, what is it to be Hispanic? What is, these things? Because growing up in LA, it's kind of confusing, because I can definitely tell you the truth and tell you that I have always identified heavily with my Spanish identity, and I've been to Spain and I've loved Spain, and for a moment in my life it was a huge identity. But as I've grown older and started to see things more fully, I've seen and felt a kind of identity crisis in the way I look at myself sometimes, or not that, but more, it's an interesting thing being Hispanic and being of a culture that is similar to that of other cultures. And, like, although we're different in so many ways, there's also so many ways where we are similar. And so again, I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to kind of get into this and break it down a little bit more and imagine myself and how would I would be treated. Would I be treated as European, or would I be treated as Hispanic in a time where people of quote-unquote European descent and people of Mexican-American or Mexican descent having tensions, racial tensions. And again, like, going back to, that Spanish identity, one of the great things that I stumbled upon, taking this wonderful class, ethnic studies, was Martha Menchaca's Chicano Indianism. And she makes a lot of great points about how when the U.S. took control of Mexican territory after the Mexican-American War, how a lot of Mexicans, mestizo Mexicans, or more white Mexicans, or more indigenous Mexicans sided with their Spanish side, because that's what was more approvable to the U.S. at the time. Because all the way even to the 1900s, there was complete racism and complete oppression, complete discrimination and bigotry towards indigenous Mexicans. And so even indigenous Mexicans were completely trying to disidentify themselves with their indigenous background, because if you consider yourself more Spanish, you would get much better treatment, and you could also even possibly get the right to vote and better rights as a U.S. citizen. So Martha Menchaca, absolutely beautiful writing and powerful stuff, and she breaks down kind of that Chicano identity and the treatment of Mexicans post-Mexican-American War. And for me, I interpret it as a way also kind of leading those things that she talks about from post-Mexican-American War all the way to the 1900s, or late 1900s and early 1900s, not late 1900s, roughly early 1900s, of how some of these treatments towards the Mexican Americans and Mexicans and indigenous Mexicans and mestizo Mexicans and Spanish/white Mexicans, of how this treatment of from the U.S. to Mexicans has trickled down, and obviously things have gotten better and people have gotten rights now in the U.S., but how those ideas and that bigotry and that racism and prejudice has trickled all the way down to modern day perception of Mexican Americans. And it's been since the Mexican-American War all the way till the 2000s and the modern century. You know, it kind of makes you think that some of these things are kind of how some Americans look at Mexican as, you know. They especially with Trump and immigration and ICE, how, you know, some of the writings of Menchaca is coming back into play. The treatment, the racism, the xenophobia. And so her work just shows you how from the very beginning after of the Mexican-American War and the treatment of the U.S. towards the Mexicans, how that is still in some way in act right now in modern times. Anyway, I would like to wrap this up because I've been talking for a bit, but sometimes it's important to imagine yourself and put yourself in other people's shoes and see and think about these things, and it makes you a little bit more aware, self-aware, conscious, and this class has been a wonderful class. It's provided me a lot of knowledge, and again, new perspectives and new ways of thinking and looking at my own identity, because as an adult it has changed a lot, and now I look at things slightly a bit more prudent, a little bit more with more experience. And anyway, I appreciate anybody who has listened, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day / night or whatever. Bye-bye. Adiós.
Ese tostado, ¿para dónde la lleva pues ese? Nel, ese, pues si no voy, vengo. Usted sabe que vengo del paciente, vine aquí al Oscar. Me vine a parar garra, Guacha este tacuche que traigo, que suave tramado ese. Pero el carlanga está de aquella, Nel, este carlanga está padre, Ese lito, venga, ¿sabe qué? Vamos al hoyo, allí vamos y vemos un vato que se llama Jimmy, que le suena también bote al alba, y usted le puede sonar también, me canta una cancioncita, ¿sabe? Se pone alerta, póngase aquella, nos ponemos tirili y luego volteamos con la chava y todo eso. Ahora, suénele, viejo.